Hey guys, welcome to my Thursday night football prediction video. As many of you may have guessed, obviously, this game plays a potentially pivotal part in where the division goes. As we all know, Detroit does have a commanding lead in the NFC North at 11-1. And then you have the Vikings, who are a two-loss team at 10-2, and then the Packers, who are 9-3, which I feel like ordinarily would be enough to win, a division. But with how stacked the North has been this year, and I think, the ease of schedule going along with, the NFC North's games this year, I think that, that's played a part in how, I guess, easily attainable games have been that are outside of the division this year, with the NFC North playing the AFC South teams collectively, and then the NFC West, which, as we all know, has underperformed, much to, many people's standards, with teams like the Rams, the Niners, and even the Seahawks, who, I mean, many people counted out before this season, but I was like, they have a good roster. But looking at, these remaining 5 games in the North, every win is pivotal. Yeah, especially for this division. Obviously, you look at the Packers and you have a really good shot to make the playoffs already. But the Packers, and as I know it, want to be able to prove that they can beat their divisional opponents. And obviously, with the way the division is, it is likely that you'll meet these teams a third time in the playoffs, whether it be the Vikings or the Lions. But let's get down to the nitty gritty. I'm going to do a brief overview of the last game and how it went because I still remember it, being a game that I was like, our team could have won this. And there was certain circumstances in that game that are no longer circumstantial for this one. I want to start off with my Packers. Obviously, Love was not fully healthy. He's really only been himself the first part of the first game and for most of the, Philadelphia Eagles game. And then I think with the last 2 wins being against the Dolphins and then the Niners is when he has looked fully healthy and unhindered by injuries. This, of course, will play a huge role in this game. I think if anybody remembers the pivotal play that ultimately screwed the Packers against the Lions in their last meetup was when Love threw a very, very bad pick six where he panicked. He was trying to get it to some running back near the line. And ultimately, it went to a DB that happened to be blitzing, and it was a free touchdown before the half. And I get it, no interceptions ever free, but he had a straight line to the end zone, and there was no stopping him, thus making my Packers lose 24-14. And I get it, you take 7 points off of that, and hey, the Packers, it's still a losing, score, but you also have to take in fact that it took a possession away from them ultimately, where if they were allowed to keep playing that drive, then maybe they come away with 3 points or even 7. But looking at Detroit, we all know about Sonic and Knuckles, Montgomery and Gibbs, and their running tandem that ultimately is, you know, what stokes the fire of this offense. I am not willing to say that Goff stokes the fire of this offense enough. I think he does really, really well against porous teams, like any franchise quarterback and above should do. But he hasn't, carried this team, to great lengths. And even in their last game on Thursday against the Bears, he didn't have that many passing yards, and while and the thing about it was is it's not like it's not like the Bears were getting pressure on him. He just wasn't completing, passes very much. Against a secondary that is pretty good. They have good players. But I think with the amount of time he had and how limited he was pressured, I think he should be able to do better than what he did last week. Now, my Packers obviously did very, very well against the Dolphins in terms of holding them to minimal points and then also scoring a lot of points themselves and being unhindered by the cold and the snow. Obviously, this game's going to be indoors, so there's going to be no sort of advantage in terms of weather. I do think Detroit's a hard place to play. I think my Packers have had a good amount of success against them there. And I mean, obviously last year, nobody counted us in on Thanksgiving. Everybody was like, oh, this is really going to show us just how bad the Packers are and how bad Love is. Even though we had been coming off a win against the Chiefs the week prior. And I think that just given the history and the way that these two teams are now, there is a lot of butting heads, and it is ultimately a bitter rivalry. But me as a fan, I do respect the Lions. I just like to look at each team with a modicum of reality, where it's like, I don't think any team is ever unbeatable. There are definitely some teams that they perform, you know, way above average than the league, but the Lions are not exempt from having these close games that they could ultimately lose if, teams, weren't making certain mess ups against them. So and I guess one other thing that I'd like to say is that Taylor Decker obviously suffered a knee injury last week. And while he has a full week, obviously, before, Thursday's game, because they played last Thursday, which I think the league did on purpose because they wanted the Lions Packers game to be an unbiased, as unbiased as it could be in terms of like, yeah, they have the same amount of rest, the same amount of days between the games. But I think that Taylor Decker being somewhat hurt, could potentially hurt this team in the long run. I do think that Skipper, their backup left tackle, has been doing, all right. I don't think he's like a liability or anything like that. But he's obviously not Taylor Decker, who ultimately, I mean, depending on how you view it, could be the third best lineman on this stacked O line behind only Penei Sewell and Frank Ragnow. Or you could say he's better than Ragnow, so he's the second best. But ultimately, it is, to me, a thing to watch in this game. One other thing, I guess, to watch is you got Zadarius Smith returning to the NFC North, obviously having been with the Packers, then the Vikings, and now the Lions after right before the trade deadline because of Aiden Hutchinson suffering an injury. But you wonder if he's still a little bitter. You wonder if he'll still provide like an impact. I don't think he's done much since he's been on the team. Obviously LaFleur is familiar with him. We'll probably give him his 2 cents on, you know, for the linemen, because obviously the linemen on the Packers were not with the team when Zadarius was, as well as and Love is, familiar with Zadarius. But I think that the Packers offense clearly is moving at a high clip, a lot of weapons. Tucker Kraft was involved last week. Christian Watson has been more involved since the bye. Dontavian Wicks has been good. Romeo Dobbs was obviously out last week because of his concussion he suffered against the Niners, and he was looking good. And he's still apparently in concussion protocol, but I am hopeful that he can play. Jair Alexander, who was out for the first game, he is potentially back and is questionable, but has been practicing. And I think that, just given the way that the Lions like to play defense with man coverage, that's something that you could take advantage of, if you're the Packers with a lot of solid route runners, good hands players, and obviously a good amount of speed with Reed and Watson. So, looking at this, I think that because Love is finally healthy, they in the first meeting obviously they were without Hutchinson, but without a solid pass rush, I think that Love can really have a game. And I think that if the Lions are going to keep up, they need Goff to be able to perform. And it's like, barring any sort of turnovers from the Packers, you're not just going to be able to run it all game. And obviously, as we've seen, the Packers have been running well with Jacobs, Brooks, and even Emmanuel Wilson from time to time. It's hard to get three backs incorporated, but I think that my Packers win. And I'm not just saying that. I think that they're ready to kind of put shame on the Lions. And I mean, they had a good game plan the last game, and they only lost by 10 with, all the turnovers and all the really just kind of bad play from the Packers early in the season. But now it's like you look at, this game, and it's obviously not do or die for any team, but they're gonna see it that way as like, we don't want to give this team a shred of confidence over us for a potential game 3 in the off season, and we really want to put, our stamp on, even if we don't have a better record, in the Packers' eyes, we're ready to go and we're ready to take this thing and go farther than you in the playoffs. So I'm taking my Packers in this game. Obviously, anything can happen. It's primetime football. The Packers haven't had much primetime, obviously last week being their first primetime game of the year. But they're gonna have they have a lot we have a lot of primetime games, in the month of December, which, I like, but it's going to be exciting, and I really expect it to be kind of electric in Detroit on Thursday Night Football. But if you want more NFL content like this, where I'm predicting games, where I'm looking at these teams and I'm really trying to be, critical of, each team and how they performed and what their weaknesses are, then, feel free to subscribe. But if you want to leave a like, comment, I'll get back to, as many comments. I'm assuming there won't be a ton, but I'll respond to every comment if you've got some other differing opinion than mine, and feel free to post it. I'm all ears, and as always, go Pack go.